Phoenix and Las Vegas combine to have as many train stations as I have pet unicorns. None. And that is despite the fact that Phoenix and Las Vegas are two of the three largest cities and metro areas in the mountain states of America, with Phoenix having the largest and Las Vegas having the third largest. This is a travesty, and today's video will discuss how to address this travesty. My proposal in today's video is for high-speed rail connecting these two metro areas to each other and to Tucson, Arizona, the fifth most populous city and metro area in the Mountain States in its own right. The southern/eastern terminus is Tucson, where there's an Amtrak station currently. Heading out of Tucson, my plan would be to parallel, but not use, the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. I would parallel them in order to minimize the number of properties that need to be raised to make this possible. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to use the Union Pacific tracks between Tucson and Phoenix, because using those tracks would put a significant limit on how fast this high-speed rail line can go. And in some places, limit max speeds to a slow 60 miles per hour. No thank you, because we want to be going 3 times that speed for a top speed, at least. Not that we will always be doing that speed between Tucson and Phoenix, because there are curves between these two cities if we were to follow the Union Pacific tracks. That said, we do want to aim for much higher than 60 miles per hour. The next stop is Phoenix, where I envision a transfer with other Amtrak lines, as well as local mass transit service. I would position this station a few blocks away from the previous Phoenix Union Station stop, over between First Avenue and Central Avenue. This would put the high-speed rail service close to downtown, stops for the light rail service, and a bunch of bus lines. Heading out of Phoenix, I would continue to use tracks that parallel existing trackage. But here, it would be tracks used by BNSF Railway. I would not stop in any of the Phoenix suburbs, figuring that local and regional rail can take care of this. But in any event, the line would parallel the BNSF tracks until the tracks owned by BNSF stop heading in the direction of Las Vegas. This happens around Wickenburg, Arizona. Beyond Wickenburg, we have a couple of options. We could follow US 93, but have to deal with curves. Or we could try to carve out a straighter path that I think would avoid mountains that are too steep, as well as avoid nature areas. That path, which I tried to approximate with my mediocre drawing, would get us to a portion of US 93 that is straighter, something that happens between Kingman, Arizona, and the outskirts of Las Vegas. On that portion of US 93, I would have trackage paralleling the highway. Getting from the outskirts of the Vegas area to Las Vegas might be challenging and slower, mostly because the terrain gets rugged on the outskirts of Las Vegas, and the only way to avoid the rugged terrain somewhat is to take a path that is not the most straightforward. So when considering the average speed that is realistic with this line, I had to consider that issue. In order to get a sense of how good my idea actually is, I'm going to score this proposed line on 5 criteria that determine the ability of a line to get built in the first place, and then the ability of the line to succeed when built. Those 5 criteria are feasibility of proposal, time saved versus other modes of transport, population served, anticipated demand, and impact on the greater Amtrak network. I'll score all of these metrics out of 20, so that way, our final score is out of 100. And I have some good news and some bad news when it comes to how I rate this idea. I'll start with the good news and get to the bad news later. I took a look at time saved versus other modes of transport. This is going to depend on which city you're traveling to or from, and which mode of transport you're using. But this chart shows major city pairs on this line that I calculated transport time to or from, depending on transport mode. I made sure to calculate extras, such as rest stops if you're driving, and security if you're flying. And what I found is that the train is absolutely king. The time savings between car and train are definitely smaller between Tucson and Phoenix, which makes sense because the distance from Tucson to Phoenix is about 110 miles. And because time savings from high-speed rail typically start somewhere around the 75 to 100 mile distance mark. And the distance between Phoenix and Vegas, as well as Tucson and Vegas, is short enough that flying is still at a significant disadvantage versus a train averaging somewhere between 125 miles per hour and 150 miles per hour. All told, this is an excellent line from a time-saving standpoint. If this line were to exist in the form I proposed, anyone who takes this with regularity will experience significant time savings. So I'm giving this a perfect score of 20 out of 20 for time saved. Now to population served. This isn't stopping at Los Angeles, which is a minus because it feels like many high-speed rail proposals and plans in the western US involve LA in some way. But it does connect 3 of the 5 largest metro areas in the Mountain States. And for that reason, this line gets a strong score in the population served metric, an 18 out of 20. As for anticipated demand, I usually like to look at airport destination data to get a good sense of what the travel demand is like between cities. And in addition to that, I look at the time saved versus other modes of transport to get a sense of whether people would gravitate to the train over another mode of transport. And once again, this line is looking really strong. Given the time savings from the train, it is fair to assume that people will take trains over planes, assuming that costs between the 2 modes of transport are relatively equal. An implemented high-speed rail line might make flying between the 3 cities obsolete, and the number of people taking the trains would be a lot, if current airline statistics indicate anything. 222,000 people have gone from Tucson to Phoenix on an airplane in the past year, and 152,000 people have gone from Tucson to Las Vegas on an airplane in the last year. 884,000 people have gone from Phoenix to Las Vegas on an airplane in the last year. And that's before you account for the people heading in the other direction, most especially the 856,000 people heading from the Vegas airport to the Phoenix airport. All told, heading in the direction of Vegas, there's a ridership base of about 1.25 million passengers per year if people took the train instead of the plane. And that's even before we get to people who will take the train instead of drive. All things considered, it's probably enough demand to justify at least hourly trains during peak times. It's not out of the question that such a line, if it were to exist, could become the highest ridership line outside of the Northeast Corridor. So for demand, I give this a perfect 20 out of 20. So far, I've given a bunch of good news and good scores. But now, I have some bad news. The part where I talk about the feasibility of the proposal. This is not going to easily be built, and I don't see it being built anytime soon. That's for a few reasons. First, there's the fact that the trackage isn't in place already, and you have to build hundreds of miles of tracks to make this possible. Second, there's the fact that a Phoenix to Vegas line just isn't the priority that a number of other high-speed rail concepts are at the moment. And third, building this would require a commitment to build high-speed rail in other, even more important corridors first, something I'm not seeing consistently right now, with few exceptions. The only redeeming quality I have to offer from a feasibility standpoint is that most of the trackage would be built either alongside existing rail right-of-ways or over middle of nowhere Arizona, meaning that I don't anticipate the sort of not-in-my-backyard backlash there'd be in many other circumstances where you're trying to build new rail tracks. So if the will and the money were there, this might be doable. Still, this is not very feasible, and I give this a feasibility score of 5 out of 20. The last metric to consider is impact on the greater Amtrak network. This proposed line would only connect to one Amtrak line, the combined Sunset Limited / Texas Eagle train at Tucson. That train stops at Tucson only 3 times a week. So on the surface, this service would have a relatively minimal impact on the greater Amtrak network due to relatively few people transferring between train lines. However, I think that where this line will have an impact on the greater Amtrak network is in the perception of Amtrak. Amtrak is often perceived as slow, unreliable, and frequently late. A true high-speed rail line connecting major metro areas such as Tucson, Phoenix, and Las Vegas would help begin to change that perception of Amtrak. And such a change of perception would be helpful for Amtrak ridership. Because of that fact, I'll give this line a score of 15 out of 20 for impact on the greater Amtrak network. All told, I give this proposed line a score of 78 out of 100. In theory, it's a great concept and idea, but it is difficult to put this into practice. And because of that, I have a difficult time seeing this line come to fruition anytime soon. Hopefully, it will come alive at some point, though. And hopefully, the fact that this proposal scores so highly in nearly every other area will motivate some people. If you have any thoughts on this rail line proposal, please leave a comment in the comment section below. Make sure also to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you and have a good day.